Rage, goddess, sing the rage of Peleus' son Achilles, murderous doom that cost the Achaeans countless losses, hurling down to the house of death so many sturdy souls. Great fighter souls, but made their bodies carrion, feast for the dogs and birds, and the will of Zeus was moving towards its end. Begin, muse, when the first two broke and clashed, Agamemnon, lord of men, and brilliant Achilles. These are the first words of Homer's great text, the Iliad. Homer's Iliad was written in the year 700 BC and tells the story of the Trojan War, which is historically said to have taken place in 1000 BC. This text is super foundational to ancient Greek culture. People such as Alexander the Great would carry a copy of the Iliad under their pillows to draw inspiration from all of its heroes and warrior stories. This series is a discussion and explanation of the great contributions of the ancient Greek world to the great Western civilization through its philosophy, culture, literature, and uh, among other things. So Homer's Iliad tells the story of the Trojan War. And the Trojan War is caused by a conflict of a woman named Helen. Now, Helen is the wife of Menelaus, who is I don't know how to spell that, who is the king of Sparta. Now, there's a guy named Paris. And Paris is the prince of Troy. His father's name is Priam. And Paris decides to seduce Helen and take her back to Troy. And this does not bode well with Menelaus because that is his wife. And so Menelaus demands of Paris that his wife be given back to him, and Paris says no. And so then a war breaks out. And this war is a 10-year-long war, and Homer's Iliad takes us to the ninth out of the 10th year of the Trojan War. And the scene that we enter on is the Achaeans. These are very important people. They are that is the name of the ancient Greeks in this story. The Achaeans just took a town, and there is a guy named Chryses. Chryses is a priest of the god Apollo. And there are two important figures in the opening chapter here. There's a guy named Agamemnon. It said that the hardest part about ancient Greece is being able to say the name Agamemnon. And then there's a guy named Achilles. These two guys are Achaeans, and they just took over the city, and Agamemnon took Chryses' daughter for himself. So then what Chryses does is he essentially prays to the god Apollo to send a plague upon the Achaeans to make them sick, to punish them for taking his daughter. And Chryses is like, hey dude, you need to give me my daughter back. Agamemnon is very hesitant with this at first, but then he talks to Achilles and says, hey, Achilles, if I can have your woman, then I'll give Chryses his wife back. And this ticks Achilles off very much. And these guys were allies here, but then they stop talking to each other. Agamemnon does give Chryses his daughter back, but then there's a rift caused here. And so then we follow the story of Achilles, who goes to his mother named Thetis, who is a sea nymph. She is a mythical creature. He talks to his mother about all that has gone down, and he wishes to die a glorious death so that he may be, remembered by the Achaeans and die gloriously because the Greeks greatly honored that sort of thing. So Thetis goes talk to Zeus, who's the god of heaven and earth. He's the king of the gods. He is the most important. So Thetis asks if uh, he can make this glorious step for Achilles happen, and Zeus says that he will grant it. And then back to these two guys, Menelaus and Paris. They decide that they are going to have a 1 versus 1 battle to fight over Helen. And Menelaus is the victor here. Menelaus wins that battle. But the Trojans, who are Paris's men, I'll just write that there. The Trojans, they decide that they changed their mind and they're actually not going to hold up their end of the deal. So then they start to attack the Achaeans, and a great battle breaks out. Lots of might shown between both sides, but the Achaeans are ultimately driven back to their ships. Now, in the celestial realm, the realm of the gods are choosing sides here. Because we have, on the Trojan side, we have Apollo, who's on the side of the Trojans, as well as Aphrodite and Ares. And on the side of the Achaeans, we have Athena, and then we have Poseidon, and then we have Hera. So they're all choosing sides, and then Zeus comes in, and he says, you guys are going to stop intervening in the war, because that's how they would do it. So Apollo, Aphrodite, and Ares are assisting the Trojans, and then Athena, Poseidon, and Hera are assisting the Achaeans. Zeus puts an end to it and says that he is in total control of how the war is going to play out. Next thing that happens in the Iliad is that we are introduced to this guy named Nestor. He is another one of the Achaeans, and he asks for Achilles' help to fight the Trojans once more, but there's still a bitter feud between Agamemnon and Achilles. So Achilles says if only his ships are personally attacked, then he would go and fight for the Achaeans again. But then there's this guy named Patroclus. We'll just call him Pat for short. And he is a dear friend of Achilles, and Patroclus asks if he can go fight in Achilles' place. And Achilles says that is fine with him. And so Patroclus dons the armor of Achilles and goes out to attack the Trojans. And the Trojans believe that Patroclus is Achilles because he's wearing his armor. And Patroclus goes and fights them, and he's scaring off the Trojans. And he goes all the way up to the city gates of Troy, which was essentially disobeying what Achilles told him. He said, you just need to route the Trojans back to them. Don't follow them all the way to the gates of Troy. And because of this disobedience, Zeus, who's in control of everything, says that Apollo can strike Patroclus down. So Patroclus gets struck down. And then Hector, who is another son of King Priam, he kills Patroclus at the city gates. Apollo made him immune to really giving a fight, and so then Hector easily slays him without a problem. This causes Achilles to be in grief now, and then he decides to reconcile with Agamemnon. So the beef is over between those two, and so now it's time to unite and fight against the Trojans. But before that, his mother Thetis, who we talked about earlier, really wants Achilles to be dripped out for this, and so she goes to the god of the forge, Hephaestus, and he gives Achilles divine armor and a divine shield to really put up an amazing fight. And so the battle begins. Achilles kills many of the Trojans, and he even gets into a fight with the river god Xanthus, because what Achilles was up to was he was fighting in the river Xanthus, and he was killing all the Trojans, and all the Trojans' bodies were falling in there, and Xanthus got mad at Achilles, and then he even fought with Xanthus. After that, the Trojans are scared, and then they essentially retreat to the city, except Hector, he stays outside the city to face Achilles, which seems like a really ballsy move until Achilles starts to approach Hector, and then Hector starts to run away, and Achilles essentially chases Hector all around and around and around outside of the city walls of Troy. Eventually, Achilles catches up to Hector, and then he kills him. So Hector's dead now. And what Achilles does in revenge for Hector killing Patroclus is that he takes Hector's body, attaches it to a chariot, and rides around the city for 9 days. And in the midst of this, there are funeral games going on, the Olympic Games, which are they are not the Olympic Games, but they are equivalent to what the Olympic Games probably came from. And so after the 9 days, King Priam, the king of Troy, asks if he could properly bury his son Hector and give him a proper burial. And Achilles assents this. He had his fun with dragging his body around, and then a truce is called. And that is how the Iliad ends. Now that's how the Iliad ended, but you may be wondering, how does the Trojan War end? There are a lot of allusions to the ending of the Trojan War in various characters in Homer's next book, The Odyssey, but we get a much better picture of how the Trojan War ends through the poet Virgil, who lived in the year 100 BC, and he wrote a book called the Aeneid, which tells the story of Aeneas, who was a Trojan who goes on to the coast of Italy and whose subsequent ancestors, according to legend, find the city of Rome, which is very important to Western civilization in general. So the Trojans see that the Achaeans have built a giant horse. And then after they built the horse, they set sail and went away from the coast. And so then all that's left is the horse. And the Trojans are inquiring about this, and they're thinking about bringing the horse in. But then there's this guy named Laocoon, and he is a priest of Neptune. And Neptune is the Roman equivalent of the Greek god Poseidon. He says that it's a bad idea and they shouldn't bring it in. So the Trojans are working with very little information until shepherds bring in a guy named Sinon. Sinon is a Greek who tells the story that Odysseus wanted him dead and used as human sacrifice. He was sick of Sinon and he just wanted him dead, and so then Sinon ran away. So he's presenting himself as an ally to the Greeks. And then he explains what this horse is about, and he explains that it's an offering to the goddess Athena and is the Achaeans' key to winning the Trojan War. And so the Trojans are like, well, if we capture this, then the Achaeans will automatically lose the war. And so then they bring the Trojan horse into the city walls, and this guy named Glaucon launches a spear into the hollow horse, and that doesn't really do anything, and everyone's mad at him because he's being very contrarian to what everyone else is doing. And so then we move on, and Sinon is now offering a bull sacrifice. And what happens is that a sea serpent shows up, and it kills his two sons, and then it kills him. So Glaucon's dead, and the Trojans see this as a sign that he acted against the will of the gods and that they were right in bringing the horse in. So it's a confirmation to them. And then what happens is that there is a seer in Troy named Cassandra. And she warns them as well that bringing in this horse was a terrible idea. Later that night, Sinon, our guy here, actually was not betrayed by Odysseus at all, but he was actually a spy. And so then he opens the horse, which is hollow, because the Greeks were hiding in the Trojan horse, and then the Greeks essentially burned the city to the ground and destroy it. And then Aeneas is waken up by the ghost of Hector. We remember Hector. He was killed by Achilles, and Hector tells Aeneas, our main guy here, that he needs to flee and don't stay to fight. It's absolutely hopeless. And so Aeneas is woken up, and then he decides to put on a fight. He tries to defend King Priam, but then King Priam is killed, and so then Aeneas gathers some of his family members and other Trojans and leaves the burning city of Troy and sets sail. And these are the final words that he leaves in Book 2 of Virgil's Aeneid. Gone. And at last the night was over. Back I went to my people, and I was amazed to see what throngs of new companions had poured in to swell our numbers. Mothers, men, our forces gathered for exile, grieving masses. They had come together from every quarter, belongings, spirits ready for me to lead them, over the sea to whatever lands I choose. And now the morning star was mounting above, the high crest of Ida leading on the day. The Greeks had taken the city, blocked off every gate. No hope of rescue now. So I gave way at last, and lifting my father, headed towards the mountains. And that concludes the Trojan War with a Greek and Achaean victory. Now, Homer's Iliad is quite interesting to look at because if you read through the text, you can see what the ancient Greeks valued the most in terms of virtues and, ends of life. They honored They valued honor and glory, pride, fate, destiny, duty, and so much more. And for many years and centuries, the Trojan War and the story of Homer's Iliad was thought to be pure fiction and that there was no truth to it, just some epic myth. But there's a fascinating story that shows that there may be hints of truth to the story of the Trojan War. Let me introduce you guys to the figure of Henry Schliemann. Henry Schliemann was a German who lived in the 19th century. He was from a poor background, had a very little education, didn't make a lot of money, and he just worked at an average shop. One day, a man came in and asked for a drink, and he got his drink, and then he started reciting from memory some verses from Homer's Iliad. And this greatly fascinated Henry, and Henry started to become obsessed with ancient Greece and started on a quest to learn everything that he could about them. And Henry took a very interesting position that was unpopular at the time. He believed that there was some historical truth to the story of Troy, that it was a real city and a real war took place there. His peers ridiculed them, and he greatly wanted to prove them wrong. So he did what any of us would want to do, and he set out to dig where he thought Troy was. And so he went on a big quest from Germany to Asia Minor and started digging. And what he found were 6 ancient cities, and one of those cities was confirmed to be the city of Troy described by Homer. The size of the walls and other geographical details confirmed that one of the cities he discovered was parallel exactly to what Homer describes in the Iliad, and there's evidence of a great battle that took place there. Now we get into what the ancient Greeks believed. When it comes to various cultures, there's always an attempt at the explanation of how things came to be, and the ancient Greeks are no exception. We have the Babylonian story of the Enuma Elish and that creation story. We have the book of Genesis in the Bible and others. And the Greeks didn't have a book or specific myth as far as I know, but this is what I could find on what they believed. There was a great flood, and there's humanity who was really wicked at the time. This great flood comes and floods the earth and kills humanity. But there are 2 exceptions. There is a mountain called Parnassus in ancient Greece, and at the tip of Mount Parnassus, there were 2 humans named Deucarion and his wife, Phaera. These were the only morally good humans who deserved to continue to live, and everyone else deserved to die in the flood, according to ancient Greece. So the flood covers up the whole earth except the top of the mount where these 2 are. Eventually, the flood subsides, and then the earth is dry again. And then they hear the words, "Cast the bones of your mother behind you." Now, Deucarion and Phaera are very confused at first, but then they connect the dots and realize that the mother that it's referring to is Mother Earth and that the bones are rocks. So then they begin to toss rocks behind them, and then from those rocks comes a new birth of humanity. Now, in terms of geography, the ancient Greeks believed that the earth was a circle and that Greece was right here in the center of it all. And to the north of the Greeks lived what were called the Hyperboreans. These are very godlike creatures of some sort, and they live somewhere in the north, not reachable by humanity really on their own. And then to the south were the Aethiopians, which were like the Hyperboreans, but to the south. And to the west were the Elysian Fields. The Elysian Fields was the place where the righteous Greeks, the warrior Greeks, those who lived with honor, would go on to live for eternity. And in terms of religion, the Greeks believed in a pantheon of gods. The three top dogs were Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon. Zeus was the god of the earth and the heavens. That's his kingdom. Hades was the god of the underworld. Poseidon was the god of the sea. So these were the three